Okay, hello parents and friends of St. Justin Martyr. It has been our honor this week to accompany your children through a week of virtual vacation Bible school. It's certainly not the way that we hoped that it would go for any of us. We're all kind of sick of screen time, but we're grateful for the opportunity to hopefully teach your kids a little bit about the love that Christ has for them in a time that I think our world so desperately needs it. In late March, I got the tub for Vacation Bible School, and it was one of those moments where I totally got goosebumps. I was reading through the theme for the retreat or the week, and it was His power will pull us through. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And at that time, maybe it was even early April, we were just a couple weeks into this pandemic situation. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. God's love. He's going to pull us through this. He's going to pull this through us. And at that time, it was just kind of this cute thing. We're all kind of like, ooh, homeschooling is hard. And now we're like, over it. Completely over it. We're done. We're longing for community. We're sick of being isolated. And I have to go back to those words. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Little did we know back then the impact that this pandemic would have on us long term, how this is going to affect us for months and months to come, how we are still looking at each other through the lens of this camera and screens and not face to face in our church gathering space. And that stinks, and that hurts, and that's hard. And I've been in touch with so many friends who are just at a breaking point. They were just done with all of this, and they're ready to crumble, and they're just really struggling with the isolation and the loneliness and the homeschooling and the no activities over summer, and other people in different walks of life are just lonely. I think of my grandparents, how we haven't been able to spend time with them, and every time I'm with my grandma or talking to her, I can just hear it in her voice how badly she wants to see her great-grandchildren. We're sick of it. And on top of that, now we're facing a new crisis, a national crisis that is helping us to realize something that's so painful and so deep. The wounds that have affected our country for so long are still there. When we thought we had come so far, now we know that we're not exactly right back where we started, but we still have so much more work to do. When our emotions were already spent, now our hearts are just broken. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. And again, the lesson that we teach our kids is a lesson that we need so much for ourselves. Today's Bible point was love your neighbor as yourself. And man, that is just a hard thing to sometimes know how to do best. So many parents and people in general right now are struggling because we so badly want to make this situation better. We so badly want to teach the next generation how to do it better than we have, but we don't even know what to do. We're at a loss for words. We don't want to do it wrong, but we know something has to be done. And we have to listen to Christ in this moment. How do we best love our neighbors? Well, the Bible verses that our children learned about and talked about today on Friday, we'll be learning and talking about, is the book of Acts, which is really kind of a powerful thing to dig through right now because of the way that they came together. And I want to read this scripture to you. This is from Acts chapter 2. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles and to the communal life, to the breaking of the bread and to prayers. Awe came upon everyone, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their property and their possessions and divide them among all according to each one's need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple area and breaking bread in their homes. They ate their meals with exultation and sincerity of heart, praising God and enjoying favor with all of the people. And every day the Lord added to their number and of those who were being saved. In Acts, we see this radical kind of, all this radical stuff happening. People coming together, breaking bread together, selling all of their possessions, realizing that they have all of these things in common. And in our our humanity, so often we forget about that commonality. We pay so much attention to the differences that we have politically, or the differences that we have economically, or the differences that we have with each other on so many different levels. I could just go on and on and on about all of the differences that we have. But what we often forget about is our commonality. And a time in my life where I learned more than ever about that commonality was when I had, and I talk about this all the time because it was one of those profound moments in my life, one of those profound years in my life, was the year that I had my son Zeke. He came 3 months early. And one of the biggest lessons I ever have learned in my entire life about the commonality that we have as human beings was when we spent his 3 months in the hospital in the NICU. The reason that I learned so much about commonality was that all of the women that I was surrounded by came from very different backgrounds. Some were very well off, others were not at all. Some of them, were from the country. Some of them were from urban areas. Some of them were from, very rich parts of town. But we had gathered around the table, breaking bread together at lunch or at breakfast or whatever, and we had something very raw in common. We all had a fear of losing our children. We all had worry of what they would become, of how their journey would end. And never in my life have I experienced raw humanity than I ever did at those tables in those moments. And now we see mothers plea, we see fathers cry, because that raw humanity, that commonality that they have with us, that we want the world to be a better place for our children, is something that we all have in common. And when we look at this, again, going back to this book of Acts, we see the many wonders that the people of God did in the world. And what we have to remember is the lesson that our kids learned on Thursday. The scripture verse that they focused on yesterday was that the Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead is alive in your heart. The same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead is alive in you. And if we look in the book of Acts, those people worked wonders through that Spirit that was inside of them. We have the same Spirit. And if we ask that Spirit to guide us and lead us and change us, He will. This is how we teach our children to act as Christians. The next verse that our kids learned about today is that we're still in Acts. The community of believers was one heart and one mind. No one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they had everything in common. With great power, that same power that rose Jesus, they bore witness to the resurrection of the Lord, and great favor was accorded to them all. There was no needy person among them. For those who owned property or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds of the sale, and put them at the feet of the apostles, and they were distributed to each one according to their need. This is radical. I'm not saying, hey, everybody, go sell your house and let's all chip in together and just, that's not what I'm suggesting here. But what I am suggesting is that we have a new spirit of commonality, and that we learn something that we take from our saint for today, Saint Benedict, of hospitality. Saint Benedict believed that anyone that walked into his door was worthy of total hospitality, because in the scriptures, Christ said, what you do unto others, you do unto me. And he took that incredibly seriously. And I think that's something that we need to take incredibly seriously today. But it's not necessarily going to happen like, oh, come into my house and eat dinner. But what our hospitality has to be is a hospitality of heart. Our heart has to be open to welcoming others' thoughts right now. Our heart has to be open to others' hurts right now. Our hearts have to be open to others' ideas right now. And oftentimes, my own heart included is shut off. Or not even shut off, but just kind of aloof and not aware of people's pain. And I think that we just have a listening to do on both sides of all arguments. What if we came to the table like the Acts of the Apostles did, and we talked about our commonalities. And when we broke that bread, we had that sincerity of heart, that we were delighted to be with one another. I know that, I say if we're delighted to be with one another, I'd be delighted to be with anybody right now. I'm an extrovert by nature, and this isolation thing is for the birds. But we have to have that openness of heart, and maybe now's a great time, since we have been so isolated, for us to figure out a creative way through that spirit of unity. Going back to those simple Bible lessons that our children have been learning all week. We have to trust. That's the other thing that we've been learning about all week is trust Jesus. So we'll say, Jesus' power gives us hope. Trust Jesus. Trust Jesus. That is such a hard thing to do every day during life, no matter if it's good or bad or whatever. I have to have that picture of the divine mercy on my bedroom wall so that every morning I wake up and I see him and it says, Jesus, I trust on you. On the bottom, I'm like, Jesus, I trust in you. Right now, we have to place our trust in his divine plan, that good is going to come out of this, that his love will pull us through, that his power will help us do hard things. With hearts full of hope, we are going to go out into this world with a new spirit of holy boldness, trusting the promise of his life everlasting, and asking him to help us learn how we can be good friends. I know that this task is not one that is easy, but we are all in this together. I pray that each of you knows the depth of God's love for you. I pray that you as parents or as grandparents or as individuals are able to spread that love that Christ has for you out into this world, out into our children, out into our community. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this week. We're just very grateful for each of you, and we can't wait to see you again at church soon.